reduces risk on the investor's part. It'll also help us to get to know the tenant and understand how much they understand about owning or leasing an apartment. And once this is established, we can formulate a way of educating them on the terms of the lease agreement so they fully understand what they're getting themselves into before placing them in the best suited living situation for them. We also communicate with parents too to ease the process, because parents tend to be directly involved in the financial affairs of students, as mentioned, and this has a direct impact on the process as a whole.
So now market analysis. Student housing forms a huge proportion of the real estate market and investments around the world. In 2018, investment in student housing exceeded $16 million, which is a lot, and it's only going to increase. Our target market is student housing owners that own 5 or more properties. The prediction for the U.S. enrollment in college will hit 19.8 million by 2025. That shows that the need for student housing will increase. In the United States, housing rental rates are constantly increasing. The growth of student housing units expected to reach 2.5%, which is up from 1.4% in previous years.
So for market validation, to start off, we did several interviews with student housing owners, and we saw a trend that the time commitment among them was a lot, and this caused a lot of issues because many of them had other jobs that were in conjunction with their real estate investments. And we also found out that they had very little interaction with the tenant before they had them sign the lease agreement. So this caused some issues of the tenant maybe not knowing everything about the apartment before they started renting. Also, we decided to create a landing page and a small ad campaign to kind of see if people would be interested in the services we had to offer. So over a week and a half, I ran a Facebook ad campaign that reached over 20,000 people and got 20 engagements and 19 link clicks. So this showed us that people would be interested in the services we had to offer.
Next, we have competition and substitutes. So this is broken into 2 categories: the online presence and workarounds. First, we look at the online presence. Our online presence is broken into 3 main competitors: AppFolio, Campus Advantage, and Peak Campus. AppFolio gives you and your team the ability to run your business, stay connected, and communicate with customers from anywhere. Campus Advantage provides property management, consulting, acquisitions, and development with the goal of creating successful student housing communities. And Peak Campus makes fact-based decisions with the value of the property in mind. So each person has their own style in doing things. So depending on one's preferences, you may use Excel to develop a spreadsheet, or use QuickBooks as accounting is linked inside of it, or you may just be old-fashioned and use pen and paper.
So onto the financials. So for our expenses, we have payroll, software, travel, and advertising. So to give you some context, this is for one person who we can expect could manage up to 100 units. So these expenses, and I could give you a more detailed report after the pitch, but they add up to around $3,266 a month. So going off of that, looking at our income, we assumed that there would be a vacancy rate of around 11.6% for off-campus student housing. Throwing in one manager at a 12% monthly rent cost, and that would give us around $50 a unit. That puts our income per month at $4,432. So that gives us a gross profit of $1,116 roughly. And that shows that as we scale up and get more and more units and more people, our expenses stay the same per person, and we're able to compound our profit as we get more and more units. And then moving on to future strategies, we want to expand into new schools. We definitely don't want to become too saturated in any one school market, because that will cause us to cannibalize our own sales and our own properties. So we definitely want to expand into the thousands of schools that exist in the US and maybe even overseas as this goes on. And we definitely want to invest in creating our own software, specifically a peer-to-peer network that would help us pair and streamline the process of us getting that information from the students and help them feel connected in the process.
2 minutes.
At LeaseEasy, we understand that the leasing process can be a learning experience for the owners and the renters alike. And we'll be with you every step of the way to make it as pain-free of a process as possible. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I have a question. You considered putting, from a product perspective, AI, or is there any AI component?
So for the software we wanted to create, we definitely wanted to have an AI component that would kind of look through the users and automatically show them properties or units that would be the best fit for them based on the information they input into their profiles. But that's obviously a very long way away. I've looked at the pricing for a software package that I would like to create, and it would definitely be above the $30,000 range.
And then is this meant long-term to be full service? So everything from finding the tenant to collecting rent and all of that?
Yes, it would be full service with maintenance cost and some advertising costs being covered by the owner of the property itself.
I guess I have a question.
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, just a quick question. I just it has more to do with like how you can really get to know that tenant more. I guess I was a little bit curious of that, because if I'm a tenant that's looking for a place to rent and you ask me, you know, you're trying to find a really good tenant for the property, I'm going to be like, nope, I don't drink beer, I never party, I pay my rent on time. Like, how do you actually filter out to find the right tenant? I'm kind of imagining like an eHarmony for you know, in this kind of category. Am I kind of getting there?
Yeah, you are. I can answer this one. Our original idea was Tinder for landlords. So it's a peer-to-peer network to connect people, landlords and tenants, so you can create a better friendship, if you will, between the two, a better understanding of one another, to understand what their preferences are and what they would prefer in the house.
And
I would imagine you would build in kind of reviews, you know, the power of reviews, kind of like Airbnb.
Right.
The more time, you know, the more reviews, the better scores, that you get kind of a favorable, you know, positions within the category.
And to piggyback off of that, the types of questions we'd be asking wouldn't be quite straight up like, do you like to party? Because we know people are they're gonna save face. It'd more so be kind of things like, do you own a bicycle? Do you plan on bringing it with you? Do you have a car? So maybe we want to place them closer to campus if they don't have access to a vehicle. Have they ever rented an apartment before? And the people who haven't, we definitely go beyond to try to educate them about the processes of owning an apartment, or maybe some expenses they wouldn't be aware of.
I would say, looking at some of your, I kind of saw the market here. Have you guys looked at where would you expand first, and look at some of the competition in the localized markets that you would think of expansion in?
Could you repeat that?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I know you kind of looked at this market here for St. Bonaventure, right? I'm guessing that's where the 89 units in the financials came from?
So the price for the units around 2,500, that was per semester. That was from here. The vacancy rate was overall for off-campus student housing, so it wasn't specific to this market.
I was just going to say, like, have you looked at markets where you would expand this product and looked at some of your localized competition? I saw some of those competitors there, but every big college town, I'm thinking, has a website that's kind of already maybe doing some of what you're talking about. So I was just wondering about expansion further down the road, what type of localized market research you've done in places you think you can expand to.
I have done interviews in Slippery Rock University, Lock Haven, Alfred, and working on Binghamton at the moment, but I haven't been able to get an interview with someone from Binghamton yet.
Is all this an online IT? Is it how much of it's on boots on the ground? And maybe you said that and I missed it. How does this all work out?
So at the moment, we would be using software to help manage our properties, but it would very much be a boots on the ground kind of, you take the tenant through and you ask, like you show them the apartment, but the survey would be online. So it would be very much like a traditional property management company.
So you would need then, as you go to different colleges, different universities, you need teams built almost be, is it like a franchise or something that would be working that college?
Yeah, we would want to expand our teams to be localized within the area of the different schools.
Okay.
Any more questions?
I guess I got a couple more. Just curious if you guys looked into the cost of insurance, maintenance, arms. You know, I'm imagining insurance is super high on this, and you know, trying to partner with local maintenance groups to do repairs. You guys have kind of an idea of how that looks?
Yes. So for maintenance, I've talked with several property owners, and also my dad owns a construction company. So we put it at around $200 a month. So set fixed price. That should cover most of the yearly maintenance, maybe many issues that come up. So that is actually factored into the financials. But insurance, we have not looked in yet. We would assume that that would be covered, renter's insurance would be covered by the property owner.
Would you need some general liability insurance for what you're doing and how you're screening and how you work with people?
I'm sure the regulations from state to state would differ as we spread out, but
Right.
I definitely in New York, I think we would need some sort of liability insurance.
Yeah. And I know on the chart you said, what do you see the cost of this being per month to sign up for this would be?
Okay, so we would charge, so it'd differ from unit to unit. It'd be 12% of the monthly rental price that we would charge per month.
Okay.
And this wouldn't include, so every time we place a new tenant, there'd be a 50% of the rent price fee that we would charge. But if that tenant were to see this apartment as not a fit for them and somehow void their lease agreement and get up and leave, we would refund that to the property owner. That's kind of our promise, that the people we're putting in these apartments aren't just people we're trying to just throw into anywhere. These are people we see as a good fit and we think will stay there long term.
The 50% was 50% of what?
1 month's rent price,
One
as
month,
a
the
one-time
first month.
charge
Okay, yeah, okay.
for placing a new tenant.
Right.
And this is seen as pretty standard practice among most property management companies.
Just to help me, because I don't know, what's property in Olean going for right now? What are they getting out of these properties a month?
So there is a property for sale right now that's right over the bridge into Allegheny. It's going for about $75,000.
Well, not so much what it costs to buy the house. What kind of rent are they getting from students? I know how much I paid as a student in 1967, which was outrageous.
The average cost is right around $2,500 a semester
For the room, for the house.
for each person per unit.
Each person in, well, now, for a house. So let's say it's an apartment. And how many people would be, let's say if there's 4 people in the apartment, it's $2,500 split by 4. They each pay $2,500.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is pretty lucrative business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I know. I mean, this is one piece of real estate that's, yeah, students tear
Tim,
them up,
would you
but they
like to be
also
the
pay
first
like-
customer?
No. No, that's not in my wheelhouse. Good deal, but that's not where I'm headed. So thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Let the judging begin. Jason.
Overall, I think you guys, I'm impressed with your preparation for the pitch. You seem to have practiced a lot. You kind of knew what roles each of you had. I think your delivery of the information was really good. The way you put it together, I think I'm impressed. So good job on that.
Thank you.
I'm not necessarily like, I actually have rental properties myself, but I'm a little unclear of these other programs you mentioned, like Appfolio, Campus Advantage, Peak Campus. So I always go back to the basics of like, I'm having a hard time understanding exactly where the differentiation is and how you guys are kind of carving out a specific niche. I think that's such an important thing that could be overlooked a lot of times when you first try to develop this plan, is like really honing in on that niche and understanding what the whole ecosystem is. Those are like two things that I always ask my business partners when we're looking at markets for a new product that we're going to develop or invest in. So that's really just my overall general question. I mean, I have the basic questions of go to market and the channel and all that stuff, but I always want to know that part first. I really want to be the expert in what the entire ecosystem looks like first, before the product is even built. So what I can guarantee you is after you do that for a period of time, your product's going to change for sure. So I never like to go too much down that path until I really know what that whole ecosystem looks like.
Sorry, Katie.
Okay. So I think one thing I liked is you looked at substitutes when you were looking at competitors. So good job there. I'm going to echo, you guys got to get better on your intro like the other two teams. I wasn't 100% clear on what the problem was. Maybe it's because it's outside my wheelhouse, but I think you got to get a little bit more clear on that. From a financials perspective, I think a slide for you guys that would be really helpful is kind of growth over time. So a graph or like a graph that shows as you add more people, what your revenue is going to look like. So, or do it out like in our first 6 months, we think we're going to have 6 customers. In a year, we're going to have this many, and show that over time, kind of the hockey stick growth, because you can do that pretty easily. It might be another tip for everybody else too, but when looking at your slides and your presentation, that kind of hit a gave me an idea there. And then you may want to look, now this is a little bit different than your model right now. It's more Airbnb model, but I would look at Rent Like a Champion to understand other markets and where they're at. They not only have the Airbnb model, but they also own the majority of the units in some of the areas they service. So in South Bend, I think something like 60% of the inventory online they own. So I think it might give you kind of an insight into other areas or other markets. Also, because they were on Shark Tank, there's just a lot of information out there about their business model. So I would just maybe do a quick deep dive on Rent Like a Champion. And then I would also, Doug asked a question about localization. I would look at what it looks like in an urban setting versus a rural setting as well.
Jim, you're on mute.
I agree with, I mean, add to what a lot of Katie said. And I think the one concern I would have also is the urban market versus the rural market, and especially as the Olean market, but just having lived there, I live there. So I guess the fact is seeing that some of these owners of these properties, of how much they're willing to pay anybody else a piece of their pie. Versus in some of the more urban areas where you got bigger groups that own bigger groups of houses. So that would be one of the concerns of just drilling down, is where you got in Olean, you got somebody he bought a house because he just saw big bucks, how he could sell it for, you can rent it for this much a month, and It's better than trying to rent it to some family. You make a whole lot more money than renting it to a family for a year. So that's just one of the concerns of really drilling down what is the saleability of the product in what areas. And it might be better in more of the urban areas, the bigger areas, bigger schools, as to where you get some of this. That would be a concern. It's certainly totally out of my wheelhouse when you get into the real estate and start talking Airbnbs and all the rest of that stuff. That's not, I don't do that. So I really don't have an appreciation for it. But I think the idea of making it work, it's a great model that could be transferred from university to university and city to city. And I think and certainly a lot of work put into the work they did do and getting the information together. So.
Can I just add to Jim's thought? When you look at it from a scalability standpoint, you're going to need to understand the laws, probably county by county or town by town. I know that with some of these schools, like in Olean, you can only have like 4 people living in a house. So you're going to have to understand those laws and the regulations when you roll this out or think about scalability. Or build that into your AI or product or whatever.
Doug, you're up.
Yeah, and I was thinking you guys kind of solved the problem for here, which I like. You kind of took Bonaventure, right? You get a lot of tenants that don't, or a lot of landlords that don't necessarily live here that need help kind of managing and matching some of those properties. But as Jason said, if he's not having a problem filling his property, what's going to make him want to share his piece of the pie? And so I think that's what you're going to run into in some of the others. And the reason I asked the question about localized, and this is kind of what Kate hit, when you go to some of these other, and I went to school in a very urban place, we had a website called odurent.com, and I just pulled it up right now. I would encourage you to check it out and see what that one looks like. It's kind of the same thing. You have one in South Bend, you have one in Norfolk, Virginia. I was impressed, Devin, when you kind of gave me some of those towns that you have already looked into about going out to, because you probably don't have some of them there, which is awesome. You found some other towns that might look like this marketplace as well. But I think making sure you understand what the problem is, it might be different in each market too, right? Re-identify the problem as you go into each marketplace. And like I said, for some landlords, that might be enough for them to invest in this. But if they're filling it and they're getting by, what's going to make them want to cut you in on their profit margins? Most people, it is a second business. So it is kind of something they're looking to make the highest profit margin they possibly can.
Thanks, Doug. Connie.
A couple of things. I agree with what's been said so far. I think differentiating between the urban and suburban market may then bring you down a decision tree to make some other choices, not only in your pricing, but how you share the fee structure. I mean, in some markets, the fee may be heavily weighted on the student rather than the landlord. I don't know that. Again, I agree with Jim. It's real estate's not my strength, and I'm not involved in it, but determining what your market is may also change some of the things you're looking to do. Jim's point, 1 or 2 houses owned and only on guy gets enough people to rent, he's not going to have a big issue. I think overall on the presentation merits, I think your financials, the deck of slides was good. Your knowledge of the problem, how to solve it, what you've done to pitch the concept. I thought you guys did a good job. I think just getting a little more granular in your data might help, and then deciding where you want to go, because I think it will be different based on the market. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any last comments from the judges? Feedback?
I was going to say real quick to piggyback off Connie, some of those meal prep services, they do variable pricing based upon whether they're in urban or suburban. That might be something to look at. Maybe there's a different fee structure that you have based on that marketplace. That's a really good idea.
And just add, I mean, and I'm not as close to it as I was, but a lot of these landlords and these college properties, I mean, one is, as I said, you can make more money out of a couple semesters of having kids in there than you can get out of renting it to a family for a year. A lot of the owners of student rented property or close to slumlords. And so you're dealing with that type of, so you really got to pick the cream. You got to be dealing to the cream of the crop of the owners and the properties out there that they even worry about the upkeep of some of their properties. I know the one I lived in was not.
Was that you throwing the washing machine off the balcony, Jim?
No, we never got in any trouble, but we certainly, actually, our house was condemned the second
After you,
not because
after
of, no, not because of us. It was, somebody said, it was a thing, it was condemned for, we had 4 guys living in the house and they condemned it for no more than 2 people. And we're a month and a half into the semester. Now we sweet talked the code enforcement lady to let us live there, and we lived there for 3 years because we weren't throwing washing machines out the window.
great job, everyone, and thank you, especially to the judges and everybody. So this was a good round 1. We're just gonna jump in these breakout rooms for 5 minutes. It's more of a deeper.